Hey, welcome to Ozark Alternatives Farm here in Lowell, Arkansas. My name is Paul Chapracki. I'm the head farmer here. This is my 10th year growing certified naturally grown food, flowers, and fruit here at our farm. I've been very interested in growing organic food since I learned a lot about how conventional food has been grown, and there's been a growing demand for growing organically in our area. So that's something that I found a real good opportunity to expand into. Here at the farm, Ozark Alternatives, we only grow certified seeds, USDA seeds, and we use no pesticides, no herbicides, or synthetic fertilizers. So this year we're working on a trial test with grafted and ungrafted tomatoes to find out if we can improve our yields by using a grafted tomato that has high resistance to disease and pest and hopefully produces more fruit. I've never used grafted tomatoes of any kind ever, so this is a new experiment for us and our farm. It's something that I've heard about, but until you do it yourself one-on-one, it's hard to take somebody else's results and apply them to your farm. So the best way is to invest into some of these grafted tomatoes, put them in the field, do side-by-side trials, keep the data, and mostly what we're trying to do is focus on yield, but also looking at disease and pest resistance. So we're just now starting to harvest some of our ripe tomatoes. We are doing 2 different varieties this year. We're doing a heirloom brandy wine and then a high tunnel version variety called BHN. That's specifically for high tunnels that can take higher heat. They're a determinate tomato, so they have a short window and they produce a lot of fruit all at once, and then you're done. Whereas the brandy wines are an indeterminate, so they'll keep growing, and as long as they're being watered and fed, they're going to produce. So we're doing this side-by-side test to determine if it's better to just go ahead and buy the seeds yourself and start them, or to invest into the grafted. There was about a 2-week delay in the time of us getting the grafted plants and our plants that were by seed. So what you'll see, at this part of the stage of the trials is, the grafted are a little bit behind, but only by about 2 weeks. But so far so good. They're growing. The grafted ones caught up quite quickly. They've got a lot of fruit on them. They're ripening right now. And we're going to do some harvesting today and start to calculate some of the numbers and keep it going. Yeah, so growing organically does present some challenges and some issues as a farmer. And that's something that just kind of goes with the territory since we're not using the pesticides and the herbicides. So some of the challenges that we've had is we are experiencing some fruit worms, and they get in there and do damage. So we try to spot them right away. We try to pick off as many as we can, and then we use OMRI approved organic certified pesticides that help us out. So we're experiencing some worm damage. We have some early blight, which is very common in all tomatoes across the board. In 10 years of growing, I've never not had early blight, so that's something that we deal with. But one of the struggles that we're dealing with this year is being this part of the season, which is almost end of July. It's the hottest time of the year, so our temperatures are raising up into 120 degrees in the high tunnel. So we're noticing some tomatoes that aren't quite ripening up. And that does happen at this time of the season. So the plant has a hard time taking up nutrients at that time. So we're trying to add a little extra nutrients. We're adding some fans, trying to reduce the heat at the hottest part of the day. So we do have some struggles, but I like to say, when you're farming, all naturally, you got to grow 1% for the bugs and the disease, 1% for you, and another percent for your customers. So you always just got to grow more than what you expect, because you're always going to have these losses through the season. But we think there's a tremendous value and benefit to growing organically, and our community is really looking for these kinds of foods. So it is. There are challenges, but there are also a lot of rewards in it. So. Yeah, by being certified naturally grown, markets are opening up, and we see more and more folks at the farmers market that are interested in buying organic food. you know, you have families coming along with little children, and the first question they ask is, do you spray? And of course, we're happy to say, no, we don't, and we're certified, and we have our kids working at the market, and that's all they want to hear. So at the market, you don't seem to be able to raise your prices to offset that organic standard. What I've noticed in the past is a lot of other farmers see you raise your price because you are organic, and they'll just go ahead and raise their price as well, even though they may not be. But the opportunity at Ozark Natural Foods, which is a local cooperative grocery store, they give us a premium on our product, and you can only sell there if you are certified naturally grown or USDA organic certified. So a lot of times their wholesale prices are equal to what I can sell retail at the farmer's market. So, and not only that, they buy volumes at a time, and they just have a huge following there. So the community really supports local farmers and local foods. So a tomato that's going to produce really well, really early, and be disease and pest resistant is really important. So this grafted test is really great for us to see if this is going to provide that for us, and do a cost analysis on the amount that it costs to buy the grafted tomatoes versus the seeds. So we'll see, stick around. So these are the Brandywine. They're an heirloom tomato, which means they've been around for at least probably 100 years. People have been saving and collecting the seeds. It's a variety that has a real tendency to crack pretty easily, and so that's one thing that I've noticed. I've started to pull away from some of the heirlooms, even though a lot of people like them. Is you know, I end up having maybe 30% waste, especially if you get a big rain that comes in, and if you haven't harvested them right away, they'll crack really easily. But great flavor, excellent taste, and so what you might notice is, a lot of these tomatoes, I'll just take one off right here, will start to crack pretty heavily, and it's just barely starting to ripen up. So what I found over the years is a lot of times I'll pick my tomatoes at this stage and just let them ripen off the vine to avoid losing this tomato, because given another week, or if we get the rain coming in a couple more nights, this will explode and all this will go to waste. So one great way to avoid that loss is to pick the tomatoes just a little bit earlier. So what you're seeing here today is, this is the plants that I started by seed, and these are the grafted plants that came in. Now my tomatoes were started about 2 weeks prior to these showing up. So there is a little bit of noticeably larger growth here on the seeded tomatoes versus the ones that were grafted. But what we'll see is these will start to catch up, and I believe we'll have like about a 2-week extra harvest date on these ones, as these ones are just now starting to ripen up. So the true data will come towards the end of the season once we've harvested and calculated all the weights off the seeded ones, and then we'll continue to collect the data off the grafted ones. So here again, here's one thing right here. We got the fruit worm. I just looked down and here they are. They're on there. So we have used at least 2 different BT and spinosad sprays over the last 4 weeks to try to help reduce those. But even these little guys, they come back and they get on your plant. So this is something that we deal with on a yearly basis. But as long as we stay up on the controls and try to harvest before they get to the fruit, we still retain a lot of it. So but as you can see, these things are just really getting started. We're just starting to pull the first couple of ripe tomatoes, so we'll be growing more and more, and we'll keep up with the data. Okay, so we're in the high tunnel now. This is where we have our BHN varieties. Again, we have a 2-week delay on our grafted versus our seeded tomatoes. So these are the plants that I started about 2 weeks prior to getting the grafted plants. So you can kind of see that the grafted plants have really caught up, and it's hard to tell the difference in the size. But one difference that we are noticing with the 2 weeks is that we're actually just now starting to get really nice ripe tomatoes coming off the vine. Whereas these ones are just barely starting. So far we've seen about the same amount of damage from the fruit worms on both of the varieties. So, grafted versus seed, I'm not really seeing any difference there. They both are really good on disease resistant, so far I've seen almost no disease, no early blight on either one of these so far. So it's hard to tell at this point, but we'll continue to monitor that. So right now we're really excited about basically our first harvest. It's the end of July, and this variety is a specific high tunnel variety. It's also a determinate variety, which means that it's only going to grow to a certain height and then stop growing and stop producing fruit. Whereas the Brandywines outside are an indeterminate. They will continue to grow and the vines will expand and throw off fruit until it freezes. So I really have started to lean more towards the determinate plants in my growing, because you get a good robust harvest and then it's time to pull them out and you know exactly when to take them out. Whereas with the indeterminates, there's always this sense that you might get more as the plant grows. But what I found is that last couple of weeks, you just don't get the volume that's worth to keep them in and keep caring for them. So I typically have moved more towards a determinate tomato, which these are, which again only get to a certain height and stop growing and stop throwing out blooms. So you get a lot of robust growth in a short amount of time, very good high quality fruit, and that allows me to now pull these tomatoes in another 4 to 5 weeks and move on into a fall crop and take advantage of the high tunnel. Whereas in years past, I've had indeterminates growing here, and literally I've let them go into November and December, which was great. It was nothing better than having tomatoes for Christmas, but that forego a whole crop over the winter that I could have grown greens and kales and collards and carrots. The value just wasn't there. So I've learned to try to grow these determinants and then pull them out at the time that we can move on to a winter crop in enough time to get them in and get it up before it gets cold. So once again, we'll take a little look around in here, and we're going to start to harvest and get to see some of these tomatoes, and we're excited about keeping the data and finding out if it's really worth it to do the grafted tomatoes versus just the seeds. So stick around.